Welcome to Shastri Kara's astrological series. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about one of the famous US Congresswoman, Liz Cheney. She's from the state of Wyoming. She was first became the US Congresswoman in 2017, and she was looked to be undefeated until August of 2022, and she got defeated in the Republican primaries that was held in August 2022. When out of curiosity, when I looked at her birth chart, I came to know that she's going to Sade Shani, and right now she's in the third phase of Sade Shani, and which is going to end in December of 2022 or January of 2023, just a few months from now onwards. So I took her birth chart and started trying to analyze the impact of Sade Shani on her career. And this presentation is exclusively about how Sade Shani can can have an impact on a person's career, life, and all other points. And here I'm going to give the best way to explain so that those who are looking at this video can understand from an astrological perspective the impact of Sade Shani. I'm hoping that you will like this presentation too. Thank you very much. Let me start analyzing her birth chart. According to Astro Data Bank, she was born on 28th July 1966, and the Lagna is Taurus. It was at 23:57, that means just 3 minutes before midnight. That was what has been shown in the Astro Data Bank, so I took that as the birth chart and time and date of birth from there, and then picked it up. First and foremost, what I noticed is that the Lagna is in Rasi Sandhi. That means it is in Lagna Sandhi. So the native's life is a little bit volatile. So exactly you will never know what exactly is the native going to be, or in which direction the native's life will be, because of the Lagna Sandhi. Then comes the another important thing to see is the planet Rahu. Rahu is in Rasi Sandhi. He is 28 degrees, that means just 2 degrees before moving to the Lagna. That means Rahu is partially in 12th house and partially very close to the first house. When Rahu is in the 12th house, the direct aspect will be on the 6th house, which is Rogasthanamo and employment conditions. And when Rahu is assumed to be in the first house, then the direct aspect is on the 7th house, which is the marital life, Kalatrasthanamo. So basically, like I said earlier, it is a little bit challenging to take this particular native's birth chart and analyze it with the assumption that the time of birth that was shown in Astro Data Bank is correct. And now let me go and look at the other planets. While all other planets seems to be in a positive for her, the biggest thing I want to show here is Jupiter. Jupiter is the 8th house lord. By default, any planet that is 8th house lord becomes a functional malefic. So Jupiter, a benefic planet becoming a functional malefic, is one of the biggest drawbacks for a person. And since Jupiter is the 11th house lord, which is the Labhasthanamo, and so the whatever the gains that she has is not something that is what she really deserves to have it. So she might be not getting the gains what she's supposed to get it for all her hard work and intelligence. Since the 8th house lord is in the 2nd house, which is the Dhanasthanamo and Kutumbasthanamo, some of her family affairs and relationship with family members will be a little bit chaotic, and Jupiter residing in the 2nd house is having a direct aspect on the 8th house, its own house, where Moon, which indicates the mind for the native, is residing. So emotionally she'll be a little bit chaotic with the family members, and the family dynamics will be a little bit chaotic. And when it comes to Dhanasthanamo, which is the wealth, even the wealth is also a little bit dynamic for her. Then another thing I want to say here is there are 3 planets that are co-joined in the 2nd house, Lagnadipati and the 6th house lord Venus. That is the Rogasthanadipati. Jupiter is the 8th house lord and the 11th house lord, and above all the 7th house lord Mars and the 12th house lord Mars is residing there. So the 7th house lord Mars residing co-joined with Venus and that Jupiter is another disadvantage for this particular native when it comes to marital life and marital relationships, which I'm going to talk in detail when I analyze the Chandra Lagna. The next thing I have to see is the 4th house lord is Sun and the 2nd and 5th house lord is Mercury. The Sun, the 4th house lord and the 2nd house lord is co-joined in the 3rd house, and that is the place where Moon, that's the house which is owned by Moon. And now let me go and look at the most important thing is the aspects of these planets. The most important thing that I look here is that since that we are talking about the career, the 10th house lord is 9th and 10th house lord is Saturn residing in the 11th house. So Saturn's third aspect is on Lagna, the very first house. That's the first disadvantage. And the direct aspect is on the 5th house, which is the relationship with the 5th house deals with father and children. So the relationship with the father, with her father and her children is a little bit dynamic. And then the 10th aspect is on the 8th house from Rashi Lagna, which is the malefic house, and Moon is residing there. Keep in mind, Saturn is residing in the house owned by Jupiter, and Saturn is looking at the house owned by Jupiter too. So any relationship between Saturn and Jupiter directly or indirectly always results into disappointments in one way or the other. That's what we are going to see in this astrological analysis. Another thing I want to talk about is the Mars. Since Mars is the 7th house and the 12th house lord and residing in the 2nd house co-joined with 2 other planets, let's start looking at Mars. Mars' 4th aspect is on the 5th house. Again, remember 5th house is father and children. So that's something that, again, one more time it tells you that while Saturn is looking at direct aspect on 5th house, Mars' 4th aspect is on the 5th house again, which is another indication that she might be having some sort of a dynamic relationship with her father and with her children. And then Mars direct aspect is on the 8th house, which is not a good sign, and Mars 8th aspect is on the 9th house, Bhagyasthanamo and Dharmasthanamo, which is also not a good sign. Overall, what I see from here is that there are a lot of issues for this particular native when it comes to the family dynamics, father and children, and marital life. Having said about the Rashi Lagna analysis, let's go and look at the Chandra Lagna analysis. Basically, Chandra Lagna analysis, I do it because I want to make sure that how the native's mind is with respect to his or her career and the family, because from the Rashi Lagna it's noticed some chaotic pertaining to family dynamics and relationship with her father especially, and her children, and a little bit of Mars being the 7th house lord from the Rashi Lagna. I emphasized myself to have a detailed analysis from Chandra Lagna too. And here the first thing I noticed is from Chandra Lagna, this is something is Mars is in the 7th house from natal Moon, which indicates that it's a part of Kuja dosha. Also, we sometimes you look at Kuja dosha with respect to the position of natal Mars from natal Venus. From natal Venus, Mars is in the 1st house. That means natal Venus and natal Mars are co-joined. So it's another form of Kuja dosha. So it clearly tells you that this particular native has Kuja dosha, and since it is pertaining to the 7th house, it once again emphasizes my previous analysis from the Rashi Lagna that there might be some sort of chaotic relationships when it comes to marital life or marital life, and especially because it is with Venus, because it is with Venus. Venus is the first house lord and sixth house lord from Rashi Lagna, and the sixth house lord again. See, sixth house lord and 11th house lord from Chandra Lagna. Since sixth house also deals with employment conditions, there should be some sort of a chaotic relationships when it comes to employment also. So that's the first and the foremost I noticed it. Second thing is Mars, a violent planet, has co-joined from Chandra Lagna. Mars, a violent planet, has co-joined with the first house lord Jupiter and the fourth house lord Jupiter. Fourth house lord is tells you a little bit of mother. First of all, fourth house deals with mother, home life environment, or Sukhasthanamu, which indicates that not only that the native has an issue with there's a possibility for the native to have an issue not only with her father, there seems to be some sort of a dynamic relationship even with her mother too. This is something that makes me concerned, because the Mars is co-joined with Jupiter, the first house lord and the fourth house lord, and Jupiter is a benefic planet. So even though the relationship is a little bit dynamic, it's so kept under the rug for most of the time, so that very few people would be able to understand the signals that the relationship that she has with her parents or with her family members is a little bit dynamic. The next thing I want to look at is the Sun, because Sun indicates leadership skills, and Sun indicates a direct relationship with the government or the king. Usually it is called as a king, and now since we don't have kings, it's a government. From Chandra Lagna, Moon itself is the 8th house lord. That's another big problem here. From Chandra Lagna, Sun is the 9th house lord, Bhagyasthanadipati and Dharmasthanadipati, and residing in the 8th house. And Sun is now co-joined with Mercury, which is the 10th house lord from Chandra Lagna. That is the reason why even though the native had an amazing career as an attorney until 2017, she moved to become she entered into politics, and it is because of the Sun and Mercury co-joining in the 8th house, the 9th and 10th house lord co-joining, it became a bit easier for this particular native to get elected as a public servant and become a US Congresswoman since 2017. Now let's start looking at the impact of Sade Shani. The first and the foremost thing, Sade Shani, her last phase of Sade Shani is going to end in December of 2022 or January of 2023, somewhere close by to January 2023. So she's in the last phase of Sade Shani. If you have gone to listen to the US politics, the news in the US, in the Washington DC these days, you might have noticed her having tough time with her friends and colleagues from a work environment, and standing alone, and for Dharmasthanamu, because remember Saturn is Dharmasthanadipati. So not only the 9th and 10th house lord, Dharmasthanadipati too. So she stood against the previous president when it comes to constitution, protecting the constitution of United States, and that's what you can see here for the past 2.5 years. Her role is because of this Sade Shani, Saturn being the 9th house lord, and Saturn is trying the level best to work for the Dharmasthanamu, to protect the Dharma, which is Constitution, US Constitution. She's trying to protect the US Constitution here. Now let's go and look at what exactly has happened on 16th of August 2022. I did notice that somewhere from June of 2022, I was fully confident that she is going to get defeated. The minute Rahu Pratyantara Dasa started in June, 30th of June, that is first week of July 2022, when Rahu's Pratyantara Dasa started, I was fully confident that she is going to get defeated, because it's a Rahu Mahadasa, Mercury is Antaradasa, and Rahu's Pratyantara Dasa. So Rahu always results into some sort of an unexpected outcomes, or an outcome that you can never dreamt about. And this is something, because being the daughter of a famous Cheney family, and the Cheney family was well known in the state of Wyoming, and such a famous family hereditary and name, she has it, yet I felt like that particular name and the fame that she and her father had, it wouldn't make her win the election. So since July of 2022, I was trying to monitor her career, how what are all the different problems that she's facing with respect to her career. And on 16th of August 2022, it became clear that she got defeated in the Republican primaries. Now, let's go and look at in detail on 16th of August what exactly was happening. In the most here you see, Rahu Mahadasa is running, Mercury Antaradasa, Rahu Pratyantaradasa, Saturn Sukshmantaradasa, and Mercury's Sub-Sukshmantaradasa. So if you look at it, Rahu, we know that it doesn't work well, and Mercury is the 10th house lord for Chandra Lagna, and also Saturn is the 10th house lord from Rashi Lagna. So the importance here is Mercury and Saturn are the two important planets that played a vital role in her trying to figure it out whether she's going to win or lose. And then if you go much deeper, Deha Antaradasa, if you go much deeper, on 16th of August at 10 a.m. local time, it's the Jupiter Dehantara Dasa started, and by next day morning 8 a.m. Saturday Dehantara Dasa ended. So if you go much deeper, it is Saturn and Jupiter who are the two planets that are played its extremely vital role when it comes to the results of whether she is going to win the primaries or not. Now let's go and look at the important is the Saturn and Jupiter. So Saturn, Jupiter and Rahu, they transit planets on that particular day. Transit Jupiter is in pieces in his own house, but it co-joined with natal Saturn. Remember, there is a rule that wherever Saturn and Jupiter co-joins, it first creates disappointments, that's for sure, irrespective of what it is. And then wherever they co-join, there is always a possibility for some sort of a dynamics in the house of Aries or Mesha. For this particular native, it is the 12th house, unexpected expenditures, and so and from Chandra Lagna, it is the 4th, 5th house. So some sort of a dynamics, unexpected disappointments came up during this day because transit Jupiter has co-joined with natal Saturn. Also, since transit Saturn is in the Capricorn, and its third aspect is on natal Saturn, so Saturn became extremely powerful for this particular lady. And since had it been a normal period, she would have won the election without any effort. Since it is a Sade Shani, we have to consider the impact of Sade Shani here, even though it is in the last phase of Sade Shani, and in few months it's going to be completed. Even then, when you look at it, the Sade Shani period always creates, and at the end of this Sade Shani period, the native is going to learn some hard lessons in a hard way. That's what Saturn does. It teaches the person lessons, but Saturn teaches it in a hard way, and I'm sure the native has learned some amazing lessons during the Sade Shani period, especially for the past 2 years. And since transit Saturn is in Capricorn, it's having a third aspect on natal Saturn. The Sade Shani was extremely strong for her. And now let's look at the transit Rahu. Transit Rahu is in Aries on that day, 16th of August. It has co-joined with natal Rahu, and it's the Rahu Mahadasa that is running. So Rahu became the most important planet for this particular native to take a decision, to tell the outcome of her life. And transit Rahu entered Mesha somewhere in March of 2022. So since March of 2022 onwards, the signals, according to the news media, the signals, everybody is signaled that there is a high possibility for her to get defeated. And by August of 2022, whatever the signals that Rahu has sent since March of 2022, that became real, that she got defeated. So overall, it's the Sade Shani and the Rahu Mahadasa and transit and natal Rahu's co-joining is what created all this mess for this particular native, and that's the main reason why we can see that the native couldn't win the elections. Finally, I want to conclude this presentation with the most important points, like number one, the Sade Shani impact is something that we cannot avoid it. Every native has to go through it, and the Sade Shani, even though it creates a lot of problems to the native in one way or the other, one thing is for sure is that the native will learn lessons during this Sade Shani period in a hard way, and that's something that I'm sure this particular native to learn some lessons during the Sade Shani period, especially since for the past 2 years when transit Saturn entered Capricorn, and this transit Saturn is going to be there until January of 2022, January of 2023. Once the Sade Shani period ends in December of 2022 or January of 2023, then transit Saturn, once it moves to Aquarius, that's where another major events are going to happen, because transit Saturn's third aspect will be on Aries, where transit and natal Rahu are still residing, and the native is still going through Rahu Mahadasa. So whatever the native has learned the lessons during these 2.5 years, after January of 2023 is when the chances are extremely high for this particular native to implement the lessons that she learned it in a hard way, and probably that's the period when there's a high possibility to say that some unexpected decisions she will be making after January of 2023. And during the year 2023, I'm sure when transit Saturn is in Aquarius for 2 years, 2023, 2024, June of 2025. So transit Saturn is going to be there until June of 2025. So whatever the decisions she makes, it will be extreme, unexpected and shocking for a lot of people, including me. And what I'm going to do is that I will stop here, and I will analyze her chart again in January of 2024. Since November of 2024 we are going to have the US presidential elections, I want to wait for the whole year 2023 to see how transit Saturn, when it entered Aquarius, how it has changed the native's career, and taking that into consideration, and Rahu Mahadasa still going on, I just want to have a pause, look at 2023 outcomes, and then based on those predict what will be for her in 2024. So I'll be analyzing her chart for the year 2024 somewhere in June or July of 2023. Thank you very much for watching my video.